Hi, United Nations have called on a urgent Security Council meeting by the U.S. representative on the 5th of January 2018. The topic of discussion was about Iran's the protests within Iran from 28th December 2017 to present. So during this is called upon based on UN Charter Article 34. It so happened the United Kingdom's did quote that charter. So
through Article 34 of the UN Charter, and I quote, to investigate any dispute or any situation which might lead to international friction or give rise to a dispute, in order to determine whether the continuance of the dispute or situation is likely to endanger the maintenance of international peace and security.
Now let's listen to what the representative has said.
That we must commit to fully upholding the nuclear agreement with Iran, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA, and we must also commit to fully promoting its implementation to the letter. Attempts at external meddling and preventing said external meddling is how we can gauge our attempts at stabilizing said countries. Stability in said countries will stand or fall by preventing said external meddling. President, the position of the plurinational state of Bolivia was made abundantly clear by President Evo Morales, who condemned in the strongest possible terms any threat to interfere in or meddle in the internal affairs that would be an affront to the rights and dignity of the people and government of the Islamic Republic of Iran. We are convinced that, as history has proven time and again, unilateral action, political interventionism, and regime change only ever lead to devastating humanitarian, social, and economic consequences. And we are seeing the repercussions of that still today, including in countries which are before the Security Council. On this particular occasion, we echo what has been said repeatedly in the past by the non-aligned movement, which has time and again reiterated its commitment to respecting the sovereignty, the national unity, and the territorial integrity of states, as well as to upholding the sovereign equality of states, calling for the principle of non-interference in the internal affairs of state, as well as the NAM's position on the peaceful solution of disputes and abstaining from the use or threat of use of force. Finally, as a state, Bolivia is convinced that any internal conflict, of whichever state or any state around the world, must be resolved in the framework of that country's own practices and in line with its own sovereign principles, without any external meddling or interference. Thank you very much, President.
There have been several cases of demonstrations and popular movements that were peaceful at first, but that became violent, and which led to the loss of lives and damage to infrastructure, and even led to external and foreign interference and undermined the stability of the region. Some of these events have led to disastrous results, and the international community is still trying to draw lessons from these events. We hope that this will not happen in Iran or in any other state.
Mr. President, the United Kingdom remains fully committed to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. It is one of the international community's greatest successes in recent memory. We welcome Iran's compliance with its nuclear commitments. We encourage all member states to uphold their commitments so the Iranian people see the tangible benefits of this deal.
We do, however, have our reservations on the format and timing of this meeting. Mr. President, human rights violations in Iran must be separated from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Sweden and the European Union are very clear on our full support for the agreement.
Equatorial Guinea, therefore, believes that frank and inclusive dialogue is the only way in which the current situation in Iran can be resolved. And in that understanding, we believe that the Iranians themselves should be capable of and entrusted with finding solutions to their own problems as brothers and sisters, making use of their democratically elected legitimate institutions with scrupulous respect for the rule of law.
Mr. President, according to the UN Charter, The Council's primary responsibility is maintaining international peace and security. Therefore, the Security Council should not discuss the internal affairs of any country, nor is it the venue for discussing the human rights issue of any country. China takes note of the recent domestic developments of Iran. China hopes and trusts that with the efforts of the Iranian government and people, Iran will remain stable and achieve development. The Iranian situation does not pose any threat on international peace or security, nor is it on the agenda of the
Mr. President, today we're witnessing once again how the United States is abusing the platform of the Security Council. Why is the United States, a permanent member of the Security Council and one of the authors of the UN Charter, undermining the authority of the Security Council as the main body which is responsible for maintaining international peace and security? I mean, I think it is obvious for everyone that the topic chosen today does not fall within the prerogatives established by the UN Charter for this Security Council. And the references we heard today to Article 34 of the UN Charter as it applicable to this situation are completely inappropriate. This should be obvious to anyone who will take the time to read Article 34 of the Charter once again. We have often drawn attention to the fact that it is unacceptable to use bogus pretexts to include in the agenda purely internal political issues. Why has the United States chosen to do this today when the domestic situation in Iran has become normalized? And by the way, we should thank Washington for this because to a large extent it's thanks to its dynamic words of encouragement and messages to the Iranian people that we witnessed a consolidation of the Iranian society, and they were united by anti-American feelings. We shouldn't look far into history to offer many examples of what short-sighted moves accompanied with interference in internal affairs lead to, or attempts to replace undesirable regimes or impose recipes of democracy. Unfortunately, due to various violations and neglect of the founding principles of the Charter, such as independence and sovereign equality of states, non-interference in internal affairs, peaceful resolution of disputes. Because of that, the situation in many countries of the Middle East that were stable until recently has become horrible. The occupation of Iraq under openly false pretexts, which is still being heavily felt by the people of this country. The gross manipulation of the mandate of the Security Council that led to chaos and destruction in Libya. The methodological incitement and fanning the flames of internecine warfare in Syria and flirting with terrorists. The war in Yemen, all these open wounds will continue to remind us of the destructiveness of geopolitical engineering and the attempts to determine the fates of other states and nations. However, people prefer not to mention this, not to remember this, and when we remind them of this, they pretend that it doesn't concern them. Sometimes we're asked why we're wary about the concept of the prevention of violent extremism. Well, the approach of the American delegation to what is taking place in Iran is an excellent example to illustrate the substance of our concerns. The source of the problem is declared to be suppression of peaceful protests, the cruelty and undemocratic nature of the regime, and there's a parallel drawn to the events in Syria in 2011. A threat to international peace and security is declared. Thus, the need for external interference is justified in the affairs of Iran. This is precisely the kind of approach that is involved in the notion that is being promoted by the United States of violent extremism. And yet, it is precisely incitement from outside and calls on so-called changes could lead to radicalization and violence, whether it's in Iran or any other country. Mr. President, the real reason for convening today's meeting is not an attempt to protect human rights or promote the interests of the Iranian people, but rather as a veiled attempt to use the current moment to continue to undermine the joint program, the joint plan of action, joint comprehensive plan of action. Similar assessments of the situation were expressed in Berlin and in Paris just yesterday. We consider it unacceptable to intentionally undermine the support of the international community for the JCPOA, which is the main achievement in nuclear non-proliferation over the past few years and in international efforts to ensure international and regional security, especially in a situation where the IAEA has continually confirmed full compliance by Iran with its obligations. Instead of that, the United States has continued to introduce unilateral restrictions that are in breach of international law. And we keep wondering, do you have any other means, diplomatic means, other than sanctions at your disposal? Instead of trying to involve the Security Council in internal affairs and interference in internal affairs, the Council should actually support useful initiatives in establishing regional dialogue on security issues. In the framework of that dialogue, we can find solutions to many issues and concerns.
Let me just quickly summarize what the representative has said. First, the protest within Iran is a domestic problem. This domestic problem is unlikely to evolve into an international security issues, and hence the UN Security Council has no right to interfere with other countries' domestic problems. Number two, most of the countries urge everybody to uphold the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. This Joint Comprehensive Plan of Actions actually started negotiations back in November 2013, and achieved the agreement by April 2014. Since this is signed under Obama, the President Trump is openly saying that it will reject this agreement, saying that the agreement is too easy for Iran. So far, the situation we see in the Security Council is everybody is saying this is a very important piece of recent diplomacy, and it is good for the world. Unfortunately, United States is unilaterally against international law to apply additional sanctions on Iran. Therefore, the bad guy here is actually United States. And calling a UN Security Council on a domestic issues is again meddling with other people's sovereignty. Eventually, as pointed out very bluntly by several representatives, in particular the Russia representative, that this is the modeling of other people's domestic problems leading to disastrous results. Examples are Iraq, false pretext, Libya, Syria. These are vivid examples, and these examples that lead to a lot of refugees escaping from Middle East as well as from Africa spilling into European countries. At the moment, many countries are destroyed, many lives are lost. So again, this is a summary of a almost 1 hour 40 minutes Security Council meetings. Hope you gain something today. Thank you.